people online will know too, so it'll just be out there forever in the world. So, like I kind of said earlier, today I'm going to be talking a little bit about stories and being a storyteller. So, kind of the premise of today is really to look at what makes a good storyteller and how you can be a storyteller as well. So we're going to start with the word story itself. So a lot of us now today, when you think of the word story, I know a lot of things that come to mind are an Instagram story, a Facebook story, newsprint, things like that. And I think we tend to forget that stories also come in written form, in oral form. Stories are passed down from generation to generation. You get them in books. You see all these different things where stories come from. And I mean, even the stories, I remember the stories my mom used to tell me as a kid when I went to bed and all the creative things that she came up with. And I think a lot of those times those stories always included a lesson in some way or form. She was always telling us, whatever predicament we got into in the story, she was always telling us that there's a way to use that for good, something to learn out of it. And I know in a lot of families, especially like during World War II era, things like that, you got a lot of letters. And a lot of the time that was the only communication you had with your family was in the form of letters. And so I brought a little letter with me today, and this letter has a little bit of history in my family. It was written in 1927 by my great-great-grandfather. And just a little history about him, he was a traveling salesman, so he was on the road a lot. And a lot of times letters were his only form of communication with his family. So he tended to write quite a few, but this one's a little special in particular. As almost 95 years on, I still find a lot of truth and knowledge in this letter itself. So I'm going to read you the first little bit of it, and we'll go from there. So the little preface for this letter is, I hope someone one day will keep this, and in years to come read it to the younger children as I have passed on. So it says, "My dear children, 50 years ago in a small town in Missouri, your dad first saw the light of day. There have been years filled with much pleasure and happiness for me. Very little of real sorrow has come into my life. Certainly the great and all-wise Father of all has been kind to me. While I have had very little real sorrow in my life, as I have said before, I've had many disappointments and have many regrets that I look back from this half-century mark. I have left many things undone, and so many things poorly did, that it makes me sad, humble, and regretful. These blunders and mistakes of mine have been so many that I could not possibly point them all out to you, but a few have been so outstanding that I feel like bringing them to your attention. For today, I am sharing the results, if not all of these mistakes. I am not sparing myself in bringing these to your attention, to do so in hopes that all of you in your years to come would profit from my mistakes, so in turn yours would not find you and yourselves in the same position that we are in today." So he just kind of starts off his letter obviously saying, I'm not going to read you all of it, but all of the mistakes that he feels like he's made in life. And he's trying to share his story with other people. So that's kind of the beginning of his story. So today we're going to be actually looking at John chapter 4. And if you look at John chapter 4, it's actually the story of Jesus and the Samaritan woman, also Jesus and the woman at the well. And to give you a little history on this, Jesus is traveling. At this point in time, they've been in the south, in Judea, baptizing and ministering. So he and his disciples have been traveling, and now they're headed home to Galilee. So they're headed north. And in between those two countries is a little area called Samaria, and there's a little bit of conflict there. So they arrive in this little town. They've been traveling for days and days and days, and they arrive in this town in the middle of the day, in the heat of the day at noon. And the disciples end up going into town to find food, but Jesus decides to sit and stay by the well. And then this is where we get started. So I'm going to read this. It's going to be a little long and lengthy, I'm sorry. But we'll break it down into smaller bits, I promise. So we're going to start off, and it says, Jacob's well was there. So this is in the town of Sychar in Samaria. It says, Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired from the long walk, sat wearily beside the well about noontime. Soon a Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Please give me a drink." He was alone at the time because his disciples had gone to the village to buy some food. The woman was surprised, for Jews refused to have anything to do with Samaritans. And she said to Jesus, "You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. Why are you asking me for a drink?" And Jesus replied, "If you only knew the gift that God has for you and who you are speaking to, you would ask me, and I would give you living water." "But sir," she said, "you don't have a rope or bucket, and this well is really deep. Where would you get this living water? And besides, do you think you are greater than Jacob, who has provided this well? Do you think you can offer better water than he and his sons and animals enjoyed?" Jesus replied, "Anyone who drinks this water will soon become thirsty again. But those who drink the water I give them will never be thirsty again. It becomes a fresh, bubbling spring within them, giving them eternal life." And she says, "Please, sir, give me this water. Then I'll never be thirsty again, and I won't have to come here to get my water." And he tells her, "Go and get your husband." This is where it gets fun. Because he says, "Go and get your husband." And she says, "I don't have a husband." And he says, "You are right. You don't have a husband, for you have had 5 husbands, and you aren't even married to the man you're living with now. So you spoke the truth. You don't have a husband." And she said, "Sir, you must be a prophet. So tell me, why is it that you Jews insist that Jerusalem is the only place of worship, while Samaritans claim that it is here, where our ancestors worshipped?" And he says, "Believe me, dear woman, the time is coming when all that will matter is who you worship, not how and where." So it kind of brings you there. And then the next thing that comes up is it says, the woman said, "I know the Messiah is coming." So I know he's coming. She's got that foreknowledge. And she says, "The one who is called Christ, when he comes, he will explain everything to us." And then Jesus told her, "I am the Messiah." So at this point, the disciples are coming back, and they see Jesus talking to the Samaritan woman, which causes a bit of a ponderance of why he's talking to her. So when we're looking at storytellers, we could look at the book of John itself. We could see who wrote the book of John and kind of figure out what kind of story he was trying to get across. But what I want to do today is look at the actual storyteller that he's talking about, which is the woman at the well. And it goes on later, and it says that she leaves Jesus' side at this point. Once he reveals himself as the Messiah, she runs home and tells her whole village about her testimony and that Jesus is here, the Messiah is here. And I think that's a really important part of it, is the fact that she goes and tells him. She tells everybody that this is going on. So I kind of want to look at her as a storyteller herself. So one of the first things I want to talk about, Andrew, if you'll pull up the slide for me on this one. And the next one. And the next one, sorry. So this one. So what we're going to look at is kind of how the world could see her as a storyteller. So from the world perspective, one of the first things that we could perceive her as is inferior. So when we look back, kind of as I was talking about, she's a Samaritan, first of all. Second of all, she's a woman. So there's no reason that she feels that Jesus should be talking to her. So when you look at Samaria as a country and Judea, they're warring countries, so they don't like each other. Judea is stuck with the Jewish traditions, where you worship in Jerusalem, everything like that. Samaria kind of took on idols and tweaked everything a little bit. So these people kind of consider each other enemies to a certain extent. And people from Samaria, the Samaritan people, were considered unclean. So it's kind of a Jewish man to come up to a Samaritan woman is kind of taboo. You just wouldn't do it. And if you were doing it, it wouldn't be for any good purpose. So the fact that Jesus comes up and speaks to her is kind of a crazy thought. So Sorry, I lost my brain here. So the point of this is the fact that from the very start, this woman comes in and she already feels inferior. From this whole meeting, she already feels inferior because she already knows that Jewish people consider her dirty, unclean, not worthy to even talk to. And so she's coming in with this inferiority complex already off the bat. So the world can see her story as inferior right off the get-go. But we see that Jesus isn't the one to treat her that way. Because Jesus could have come in and ignored her completely. He could have sat there at the side of the well and just let her come and get her water, ignored her, and left, but he didn't. So, there's that. The next piece is the fact that she's an outcast. So her past, obviously, she's not had a great past. And clearly, Jesus calls her out on it, but she knows it. She knows it. She's walking everyday life. She knows that she's not the greatest person. So she already feels kind of outcast from that. And the thought of this is, when you look at where she was. So Jesus is at the well in the middle of the day. It's hot. He's tired. Nobody comes to the well at the middle of the day. No one. Because it's hot, nobody wants to come out there. Yet this one woman does. And traditionally what would have happened is all the women in the morning would get up very early when it was still cool, and they would all travel in a big group out to the well, and they would fill their water jugs, and then they would all travel home and use the water for the rest of the day. This provided safety, all sorts of things. But we also know that when you're talking about a group of women, what do women like to do? We like to talk, right? And you get a whole group of people together, and things happen other than COVID, you know? We talk about the people we know. We talk about our neighbors. We talk about the weather, everything like that. So the key part of this is you don't see our woman at the well with those other women, because she's the talk of the town. So for her, it would be like you sitting there going, I'm going to go stand on High Street with every woman in Bucky, and I'm going to listen to them all talk about me. What I've done right, what I've done wrong, what I've been doing, what I haven't done, what my children are doing, everything. It's exposing you to ridicule every single day. So every single morning, she could get up and go with all these women into town, but she doesn't. She waits till it's hot. No one's going to be there. So she waits till the best opportune moment for her, the outcast, to be able to go and get her water and go about her day without being ridiculed. So that's a big point with her being an outcast. So there's another reason why her story in the world should be invalid to her. The next point that I've got is the fact that she's a sinner. So as we read, Jesus calls her out on her lifestyle. He says, oh, hold on. You said you don't have a husband. You're right. And there's no preface. He doesn't know her from anybody. He doesn't know her. He just comes up and goes, I know who you are. I know what you've done. But he doesn't say, oh, you're a terrible person. You're a sinner. You've sinned against my Father. How dare you? He doesn't do that. He leaves it out matter of fact. And he just says that this is what you do, this is what happened, and this is who I am. So he doesn't call her out there in a certain way, which is a big thing, because obviously none of us want to be confronted with that. Nobody wants to walk down the street and have somebody come up and go, oh, you're a sinner. I know what you did last week. Look at you. Nobody wants to have that done. So there's another reason why she is not a great storyteller as the world sees her. The next one is guilt. So she's guilty. So the world only serves to remind her of her guilt. So every morning when she gets up, when she walks through town, everything like that, everyone looks at her and goes, I know what you are. I know who you are. And she has to live with that guilt every single day. Now, we don't know the circumstances of her husbands. We don't know if they're abusive. We don't know if she left just for the heck of it. We have no idea. It doesn't tell us that. But we can only assume and guess that obviously some of those relationships probably were not her fault. Yet, she's the one who gets to bear the guilt of that and the shame of that. So she automatically, when she has this conversation with Jesus, which I love, she automatically goes on the defensive and changes the subject. So he sits there and he calls her out, "You don't have a husband." And she goes, you're right, I don't have a husband. And she goes, "Sir, you must be a prophet." She doesn't say, "How do you know me? Who are you?" Anything like that. She says, "You must be a prophet." And then she goes, "So tell me why it is that Jews insist on Jerusalem as the only place of worship, and Samaritans claim it is here." So she's going, I know this conversation. I've had this conversation multiple times, and I'm going to just change the subject. Because first of all, how do you know who I am? I mean, I'm just sitting here going, the things that would go on in my head in that situation, I'm going, how do you know who I am? Who are you? Everything like that. She goes, I'm just going to change the subject. So if you say you're a prophet, let's talk religion. And let's go this way. And I love the way that Jesus handles it, because he kind of says, like, wait and see what's coming. He's like, this religion that you're speaking of, this doctrinal difference that we have, is not what's going to be coming in the future because of me. And he tells her essentially, he goes, what's going to happen is we're not going to care about in the near future. I'm the Messiah. What's coming in the future is going to be different. And we're going to change the way that looks. And you're going to be able to worship. We're no longer going to be bound by the law of Old Testament, essentially. You don't have to travel to Jerusalem. You don't have to do your sacrifices. It's going to be by spirit and truth. And I think this is the first glimpse that somebody gets of that spirit and truth. Of sitting there going, it's not about a religion. It's not about a sacrifice. It's about a relationship with somebody. So, obviously, we know she feels guilty. So, for all these reasons, you would think, looking on the outward side, that she'd be a horrible person to hear a story from. There's nothing really good about her. She's inferior, she's an outcast, she's a sinner, she's guilty. She's just kind of a kind of person. And yet, that's not how Jesus sees her. And that's not how spiritually she's seen. So, if we'll go on to the next slide, you can see we're going to go through the reasons that she is an excellent storyteller and the ways that Jesus is going to use her in this. So, the first one is that she's willing. She could have given Jesus water right from the start. So when she walks up to the well and sees him there and he asks for water, she could have just been like, whatever, Jewish guy's asking me for water, I'll give you water. I don't care if you think it's unclean or anything like that. She could have just got him some water, refilled her jugs, and left. But she didn't. She engaged with him. She had a conversation with him. And I think that's kind of a big part of it, because how many times when we get confronted with things, do we take those things head on? Because usually we don't. Usually we sit there and kind of go, we're gonna have an argument, I'll kind of skirt the issue, I'm gonna change the subject, anything like that. She doesn't. And she sits there and goes, okay, if you're gonna ask me for water, I'm gonna make this confrontation happen. And you can almost feel that outcast part of her that goes, I wanna fight with somebody. Because she's used to that reaction of when somebody says something poor about her, of having to fight back. Her wall automatically kind of comes up and she feels like she has to defend herself. And so in this, it shows really that she's willing to be open with him. She's willing to have the conversation. What's the worst thing that can happen? So she has this conversation with him, and when he comes down to the inn and he tells her that he's the one true Messiah, she immediately accepts that fact and runs back to town. So if you're not willing and open to receive that, why would you immediately turn and run back into town and tell everybody what he said? You have to have some part of you that's willing to do something, wants something to change, and wants something to be different. So we see her wanting to be willing. And the next piece, obviously, is the redeemed piece. And I'm not so sure that if I had this woman's testimony, that I would want to run into town and tell everybody my story. I'm not so sure that I'd want to sit there and go, if you haven't heard, let me tell you, let me air my dirty laundry out to you. And let me air my dirty laundry out to you. And oh, I've never met you before, let me air my dirty laundry out to you. I don't think that that's how I would feel about it. And there has to be some sort of interaction there. There has to be some sort of switch that flips, that makes you want to come out and say that and tell everybody that. And the only way that can happen is for God to change that guilt in our life. He's got to take that guilt and replace it with grace and give us the grace where we sit there and go, I made mistakes, but I'm doing something different now. And the point to admit that. And I think Jesus wanted her to have freedom. He wanted her to have that freedom, that empty, like, I can go and change the world now kind of freedom. And the thing is, he wants us to use the pain and hurt in our lives for good and for God's glory and not for anything else. And I can't imagine a better way of saying thank you to God for your freedom than going and telling everybody you know about him. So God redeemed her story. And he said, I'm not going to use it anymore. You're not going to use it anymore for pain and hurt and sorrow and guilt and everything else. He goes, I want you to use it for good. And it's going to be for the good of the world. So we see that she's redeemed. The next part we see is that she's worthy. Now, the thing is, Jesus and his disciples have been traveling this whole time. They've been in Judea, they've been making disciples, they've been baptizing, they've been on this huge journey. And he could have easily, he knew they were walking through there, he could have easily just walked into town and with his disciples and converted and talked to everybody there. He could have easily just done it himself. But instead, he chose to take a woman with a checkered past and use her. And he had to see a worth in somebody for that. And later on in John, it talks about the harvest. And I want to kind of go over that a little bit. But this is kind of after her. He says, the woman left her jar beside the well and ran back into the village telling everyone, come and see a man who's told me everything I ever did. Could he possibly be the Messiah? So people came streaming from the village to see him. So these people come flooding out. Meanwhile, the disciples are urging Jesus to eat something. And he's like, I'm not hungry. And he explains, he goes, my nourishment comes from doing the will of God who sent me and from finishing his work. You know the saying, 4 months between planting and harvest. But I say, wake up and look around. The fields are ready and ripe for harvest. The harvesters are paid good wages, and the fruit they harvest is people brought to eternal life. What joy awaits both the planter and the harvester alike. You know the saying, one plants and another harvests, and it's true. I sent you to harvest where you didn't plant. Others had already done the work, and now you will get to gather the harvest. So it's a little confusing when you look through there. But essentially what he's saying is he's going, I could have walked in. I know these people are ready for something. They're ready for a change. And I could have easily walked in and changed everything. I could have. I could have come in and done my Jesus thing and my disciple thing and talked to everybody and baptized everything and turned in this whole thing. But instead, I chose one person who probably has never seen a spiritual harvest in her life. All she's seen is kind of terrible, sad situations. And he's choosing to use her as the harvester. So she gets to go in and tell everybody. So she's sowing the seeds of Jesus in the town. She's walking around planting those seeds. There's a guy who told me everything about me. Come check him out. Hey, come check him out. And they get to come and the harvest comes to them. And not only do Jesus and the disciples get to see this harvest, but she also gets to see this harvest. Because her story has turned from an ugly story into look at how many lives have changed due to the fact that I went out and shared my story with people. And I think sometimes we meet people on the street. I know I do it on the street that have very similar backgrounds to me, or are going through the same things that I used to go through, or the things that I currently am going through. And there's times when I sit there and go, I don't want to talk to them about that because I don't want to bring it up in me. And then there's sometimes when God tells you, no, I want you to have that conversation. Because that person may be needing something at that moment. And I know, kind of to bring it in, I know a lot of times, especially moms with kids, you get frustrated with your kids. And you want them to go a certain way, and you want to teach them, and you want to grow them a certain way, or you're having frustration because their behavior is different or something like that. And who do you go to help get advice? You don't go to the single person who's never had kids. Because I'll tell you something, and you're going, well, we've tried that. You clearly have never had kids. You go find somebody that is in the same situation as you. So if you're struggling in life, if you're having anxiety, you're obviously not wanting to consult with somebody who's never had anxiety, because they don't know it. They don't feel what you feel. They don't understand what you understand. And so God is sitting there going, in order for you to reach these people in town, I want you to go out and reach them, because they know your story. They know who you are. They know everything about you. And I want you to go talk to them, because you're the one they're going to hear it from. Because Jesus could have walked in and done everything, and maybe one or two people were saved. I doubt that would have happened, but it's a possibility. Instead, he chose to take a broken vessel to heal other broken vessels. And I think that's the thing that we like to kind of bypass sometimes in life, is the use of our story. Because we like to think that, I haven't gone through anything in my life. Or, there's a lot of people that go, well, I've not had anything exciting going on in my life. How can my story influence anybody? Well, there's somebody out there in the world who feels the exact same way. Maybe they came to Christ in a very easy way. They were raised in church. They really haven't had anything terrible going on in their life. And you're the same way. And you can have a commonality there and a commonality with Christ there. And I think a lot of times we like to invalidate our stories because of the fact that we don't think that they're that important. Yet everything in our past makes who we are today. And I think that's just a really big point that I really want to share and make, is that your story is valid. Your story is valid. And when God asks you to share your story, and when God asks you to reach out to somebody or talk to somebody, and I've had this come up in conversations with myself, that I've gone out and met somebody in the grocery store, and we started just a very general conversation about the weather or whatever. And next thing I know, God is going, tell them about this. And I'm like, I'm not telling them about that. I don't tell my friends about that. I'm not telling some stranger in the grocery store about it. And I just keep getting this, tell them about this. Tell them about this. So in my head, during this general conversation, I'm going, how do I bring in this into this general conversation? Because God is prompting us to do that. And sometimes you say those things, and I sit there and go, okay, fine, God, I'll say it. So I come out and say it, and then the next thing you know, they're looking at you in tears, because they're like, I've been struggling with that lately. And you're going, I had no idea. I don't know your history. You don't know my history. But they now have something to bounce off of. They see a similarity there. So I think it's just really important when we follow that prompting, and when God tells us, and he removes the guilt from it, when he removes that moment from your life and says, I'm going to take the guilt out of that situation, I'm going to take the sadness out of that situation, I'm going to turn it to something good. Because a lot of times we like to dwell on the fact that it was a terrible situation and it's a horrible life move, and it just sits down in our gut and doesn't move any further from there, because we just got to keep it in there, we just got to hide it in there. And God goes, I want you to open it up and use it for something good, because a lot of good can come out of that if we would just take it out, take the guilt off, dust it off, and go, God gave me grace, and here we go, I'm going to use it for something good. So we see that our storyteller is worthy of being a storyteller. She's got a story to tell. Doesn't matter what the story is, she's got a story to tell. And the last point is that she's a storyteller. And when you look at what a testimony is a share of your story. Who you were, who you are now, and how you got to that point, everything that's kind of in between. And so you see her run back to the town, and she tells her testimony. It says she tells her testimony. So literally she's walking around town to every person she meets and going, I married the first guy, he was abusive, I left him. I married the second guy, he was really good, but I was a little, because of the first relationship, so I broke that one off. I married the third guy, it was a short relationship, but he left me, it was great. Here's the fourth one. I mean, she could go through that entire story of her life. And that's just the picture that we see here. We just see the husbands. We don't know what other sin has gone on in her life. So she's telling this big story to everyone that she meets. So she is being a storyteller in real life. And I think the part that just blows my mind, again, like I said earlier, it's she runs into town. She's excited about it. It doesn't say that she sat there with Jesus for a while, contemplated the fact that maybe I should go tell somebody, maybe I shouldn't. No, she runs back to town and tells everybody. And this is in the time that it takes the disciples to go into town, get something to eat, and come back. So we're talking a very short span of time. She didn't go home, think about it for a couple of days, have a cup of tea, journal it out. She just went, I've been changed. This guilt is no longer mine. What do I need to do with it? And she's been impressed upon enough by the fact that Jesus has come out and said, I am the living water. I will wash you clean. To turn around and go, I'm out. I'm going to go talk to everybody. Everybody I know needs to know this. Everybody I know needs to know this. So she herself becomes the storyteller. And I don't think it's any coincidence that thousands of years later, her story is still being told. And I know the Bible's full of tons of stories, and I could talk about millions of stories that happen in this Bible. We all know there's lots of stories in here. But I think it's beautiful that a story that talks about somebody's hurt and how they use their hurt for good to come back later on and to be taught generation after generation after generation isn't a coincidence. Nothing in this book is ever a coincidence. But I just think the way that these stories come out, it's just a beautiful thing. And I think God uses all things for good. And he repeats it many times in here. He uses all things for good. And I don't think at the time she realized that scope either. I don't think she went into town and goes, I'm going to be remembered for thousands of years for telling my testimony. For my one encounter with Jesus, my encounter with Jesus is going to be told for years, thousands of years. I don't think she understood the scope of that. I certainly don't. I hope somebody in 1,000 years isn't looking at this video and going, she's a crazy lady. Like, it's online. It could be there forever. I don't know. And I think that's kind of one of those things. She didn't think of the implications after that. But God is using that story 1,000 years later, like thousands of years later. He's still going, I'm going to redeem that one guilty place. I'm going to take that one woman. I'm going to redeem her again and again and again and again and again. So, in the same way, I don't think that my great-grandfather, realized the scope of his letters either. And the funny thing is our family, I should say, didn't discover this letter until the late 90s, 95, mid-90s. So by that time, I mean, it's still, 70 years on that this letter has been around, that nobody knew about it. It sat in a box. And it ended up being shared at a couple family events. And now it's been shared with more people than I can even tell you. It's been kind of passed around our family. And I don't think he understood the scope of it either. But again, he repeats, he says, he goes, very little sorrow. So there's not a whole lot that's happened in his life. He doesn't have a horror story. He was happily married with children. He loved his wife. He loved his family. And there wasn't anything tragic. There wasn't anything horrible. Yet, the stuff that he had to say rings true 95 years on. So I am going to read through a little bit here and kind of share with you some of his wisdom. So again, it can be passed on 95 years. And I'm going to kind of go through them. So the first thing that he talks about, he's got 5 points that he wants to share. And I think a lot of these, again, will echo with the same attributes that our woman has, the good and the bad. So the first one is don't procrastinate. Time and tide wait for no man, as it has truly been said. Don't wait, go do it. So if we look at our woman, she didn't wait. She went and did it. Don't procrastinate. Number 2, don't be arrogant. After years of bitter experience have taken a lot out of me, remember always to respect the other fellow's judgment and learn early in life that God has not endowed you with all the wisdom in the world, and be willing to learn from the other fellow. So, again, take it and learn. Do something with it. Don't be arrogant. Don't think that you know everything at this point. She knew everything at that point. She stood there and she goes, I'm a Samaritan. I know what I was raised in. I know who I am. I know everything. Yet, she was open enough. She wasn't arrogant about it to let Jesus come in and change that view. Number 3, be a good steward. So obviously, be a good steward of money. And he says, I've never saved my money. And he goes, I spent too much money for things that which was not bread. In other words, on things that were wholly unnecessary in this life. And I think we all kind of get that. Number 4, be a student. And for this one he says, I have wasted enough time to have prepared myself for the biggest job in the world. I wish I could have read the whole book of Proverbs. The writer of that book, known as the wisest man that ever lived, says over and over, to get wisdom, you must bind it around your heart and read that there are many promises of good things that it will bring you. And you have only to look around you to find sufficient evidence that they are true. So, never stop learning. Never stop learning. Go forward. Find things in life that are true to you. And study them. And number 5. Number 5 is be confident. And after years of experience, having spent money where I should have saved it, after failing to economize my time, still there have been times where I have been to the point where I had not done all of these. Where I had weighed all the evidence and come definitely to the place where I felt that I had lacked guts. I was afraid to take a chance. My rules are, get number 1 out of your system, so don't procrastinate. Also, don't be arrogant. Listen to wise counsel. Overcome number 3 and save some of your money. and don't do as I have done. On number 4, study to show thyself approved to God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed. Having done all of these, then stand and don't be afraid. God has given us equal powers with other men and women. You can do what they have done if you only have the self-confidence to go and do it. These are just a few of the outstanding mistakes that I can see looking back from 50 years. And remember, when discouragements come, when the tide turns against you, when sorrow or sickness comes, there is no one in this world that you can turn to but our wonderful God and Savior. We can go to him for comfort and never forget to go to him and never neglect his house or keep his commandments. So through his tips there, we see that if we follow this woman at the well, follow her story, it's going to take us to those places. If we have the confidence, if we're not arrogant and willing to learn, if we're a good steward with the information that we're given. Because a good steward doesn't only mean money, it means the things that you're given in life. And when God gives you something, you can either hide it under a rock and go, oh, look, I've got that for safekeeping for later. Or you can use it for something good. And I think that's an important thing. So just to finish off the letter, it says, I hope these things from the heart of your dear old dad will not have been taken frivolously, for have said them or written them after much prayer and thought. For we do not know when our time will come to go from this world, and I should not put off saying some of these things that are in my heart, as you might never hear them from me. And I hope that some of you may have profited by these mistakes your dad has made, and not have had that awful hole down inside you somewhere that you cannot explain. As oh, how happy and thankful I am for all of you, for the joy you have given me, for your dad believes in every single one of you and your ability to make good, and I know you will not disappoint him. So let's give God the thanks and stick together and pray without ceasing. Your dear dad. So, in total, God can either use our stories for good or bad. God won't. But essentially saying our past can be Satan's greatest weapon or God's greatest glory. And you can either open up and give God the guilt and the pain and exchange it for something good, or you can just hold on to it. And God's going to use it either way, for your benefit, for somebody else's benefit. Or Satan can use it and keep you quiet. So every person that God prompts you to talk to is going to walk away not hearing the word that they need to hear. You're not going to walk away in life with confidence and say, oh, well, when God told me to say this, I didn't. Because one day you're going to get to heaven and he's going to go, that person I wanted you to talk to, they're not here because you didn't talk to them. Or, this other person I wanted you to talk to, they're not here because you didn't talk to them. So, even when we're hiding from things, even when we're trying to avoid places, be open to sharing your story and to being a storyteller. Because the only way that story ever continues is by us telling them. So, I'm going to finish with the last song I've got up here. We'll play it up here, and it's just one of my favorites about being a storyteller.